Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Sunday morning to you all. I hope you guys are waking up and having a wonderful start to your day, and I hope everyone's been having a great weekend out there so far. We have a lot to talk about in this morning's video as we're waking up to even higher confidence that severe weather is on the way once again. Now, we need to speak on tomorrow's severe weather threat first, as I do think we need to really watch tomorrow. Portions of Ohio, PA, West Virginia, Western Maryland, back down into Kentucky have a slight risk, a level 2 out of 5, and there's even a 5% risk of tornadoes for tomorrow across areas. So we're going to speak on this right off the dot. We'll break it down state by state, and we'll talk about some parameters. After we get done doing that, we'll speak on what's to come. And I really do think as we get into the middle portion of this work week, into the later portion of this work week, severe weather will be on the increase, and there's even a larger signal as we get into maybe next weekend, early the following week. We always knew severe weather was going to uptick again, but I do feel like the time frame has inched a little bit closer to us, not just because we're moving towards it, obviously, but I just think that some shifts in model guidance have occurred, which has allowed for the ridge to build in quicker across the middle and eastern portion of the country, which has allowed for more of a trend towards more severe weather a little bit closer to us, if that makes sense. So we'll speak on everything at the end of the video. We will cover today's forecast, and then we'll get you going. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below so I can pray over it and so others have an opportunity to do so too. So let's get rocking and rolling. So the first thing we'll cover is tomorrow's severe weather threat. This is tomorrow, Monday. So a slight risk, a level 2 out of 5. This goes from Pittsburgh back down to Columbus, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, down to Huntington, Charleston, West Virginia. It basically cuts, I would say it's taking up over 50% of West Virginia, but doesn't quite get down to, say, Beckley. You guys have a marginal risk, but this slight risk does extend all the way through western sections of Maryland, Cumberland, and like I said, all the way up through Pittsburgh down to Morgantown. So slight risk, level 2 out of 5. We do have a marginal risk that extends all the way up to almost Cleveland, all the way up into sections of central PA, back over to the DC and Baltimore area. Goes to about halfway down into Virginia, all the way down almost to the Tennessee-Kentucky border, all the way over to Louisville, and a little bit into Indiana. So what's driving this slight risk? If we look at the tornado outlook, there is a 5% risk of tornadoes. Wheeling, Morgantown, Clarksburg, definitely an appreciable risk of tornadoes all the way down to some small communities. It's always kind of hard to see with this map. I like showing the other maps, but you would have to pull up like 4 different outlooks because the way the Storm Prediction Center kind of separates different areas of the country. So I had to use WeatherWise. Do apologize if this is hard to see on your screen, but it goes all the way down to like the Ohio-Kentucky border. But there is a 2% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location, all the way up to Pittsburgh, all the way back down into like Maysville, Kentucky, all the way down to Charleston, Huntington, all the way back over to, say, almost all the way to like the Hagerstown, but Martinsburg, and I've already mentioned Pittsburgh. But there's a 5% risk. This brown area has a like I said, an appreciable risk of seeing a tornado tomorrow. 5% risk. So the wind threat, there is a pretty large, and this pretty much covers that entire slight risk. In the yellow area, that is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles in a given location. And the hail threat, it's a little bit smaller than that wind threat, but 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And there will be enough cold air aloft nearby to bring a risk of hail. So this is the severe weather outlook for tomorrow. Like I said, a slight risk for this entire area. It does include areas of like the Appalachian Mountains and west. So pretty wild stuff. Not totally uncommon, but let's break down Ohio first. We'll section out 4 different states. I think I got on here. Yeah, 4 states. So Ohio first. And we'll start this around 1 p.m. tomorrow. There's your time frame. Now, you're not going to see a lot of storm action for most of the state as I move this forward. I would look towards the bottom kind of right-hand corner right over here. So we starting to move into, say, 3 p.m. There's one lone storm kind of cruising just south of Lancaster or Lancaster. Not sure how y'all say y'all's Lancaster, and Ohio down here in South Carolina. A lot of locals, we have a Lancaster, but we say Lancaster. But anyways, we got a storm showing up on the HRRR model around that area, kind of south of Columbus. Now, this storm has an opportunity to mature, and it does. And there'll be some fast progression, fast speed motion of these storms, and it looks pretty strong as it gets near the Ohio-West Virginia border. But we got some storms firing up here, kind of Columbus points east. Newark over to Canton. These will probably be lacking a little bit better ingredients up here, but still enough to, present a strong to severe thunderstorm risk. We keep going, and these storms become more widespread. This is around 5 p.m. tomorrow. All these storms could be strong to severe. All of them will have an opportunity to produce a tornado. So basically, if you live in southeast Ohio, this is the area to watch. These storms could be very intense. We get to 6 p.m. Looks like most of the energy is beginning to trail off into PA, West Virginia. We could still have some lingering showers and storms. This is around 7, tomorrow 8, 9, and we're about done. So it's not a super long period. I would say it's at most 7-8 hour period of storms. But per this run, it starts off around 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's about done after that. It's about 5-6 hours. So now we drop it over or move over to PA, and we get this in motion. We take it all the way to about early afternoon. This is 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. So about around 5 p.m., here's these storms entering western PA, Grove City down to Pittsburgh. Could have some storms moving in. This is 6 p.m. Some stronger to severe storms, especially in southwest sections of the state. This is the area you need to watch. And when we get to 7, widespread thunderstorms across, might as well, like I said, just say southwest PA. A lot of storm activity, damaging wind risk, a hail threat, a tornado risk with all of these. And you keep this going. This looks like a pretty powerful line of storms kind of cruising that that Maryland, PA state line down here. So if you live in these communities down here, and it's getting close to what is it? I think it's the Allegheny Mountains. I don't want to be psyching myself out there. But anyways, we keep going here. And by the time we're in the 9 p.m. tomorrow night, storms are hitting like Harrisburg, the other Lancaster here in PA. This looks like both might get hit from Ohio and PA. But we're basically keeping the storm activity in southern PA. That looks to be the general theme here. And then these will eventually make it all the way over to like Philadelphia, Wilmington. It'll get all the way to Boston. But these storms will start in the western portion of the state first. It's 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. So a lot of storm activity through the southern counties of PA tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. Now we drop it down into Kentucky. It does conclude Tennessee also. And we start to get to 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. We do kind of have some long, strung out area of storms right here, kind of extending all the way back down into western Tennessee. And these, like I said, these short range models aren't always exact solutions, conclusions, if you will. But we could have some strong to severe thunderstorms in kind of eastern to northeastern portions of the state of Kentucky. But overall, it doesn't look too scary at all. So now, West Virginia is obviously the big state, I think, with this setup. So we'll start off around lunchtime tomorrow. This is 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m. If you live, Wheeling, down to Morgantown, just this section right here of West Virginia. I'm drawing here a little bit. Kind of like this section right here of West Virginia. And I know I obviously drew into Ohio. I'm not going to draw the exact outline of West Virginia, but you get what I'm saying. These areas right here in West Virginia, this is where you have the highest risk of a tornado. So you keep this going. You got this one lone cell right here. This could produce a tornado. So there's a corridor between Parkersburg and Morgantown. I'm telling you, watch out in this area. This is around 5 p.m. We could have some supercells going through this area. Here comes another one coming out of Ohio. So this is a 7 p.m. And, you see the little thing right here, that little long, like, scrawny oval. That is where we're showing a stronger updraft, potentially a rotating updraft going through this area. Storms are slamming western areas of Maryland, so please be aware if you live in the communities of western Maryland. These storms could rotate. There's a tornado risk here too. It's around 8 p.m. We got some powerful storms going across kind of the, I don't know if y'all call it the panhandle of Maryland, but going across these areas right here. I know higher elevated regions across this area of Maryland, but you keep going here. We could have some storms later into the evening also that cruises across the state. But I'm telling you, West Virginia, be on alert of these storms. They start going around mid to late afternoon and last throughout most of the rest of the afternoon through dinner time all the way through late in the evening. These could pose a decent tornado risk. I know 5% doesn't seem high, but I mean, I really think we'll get some tornado warnings out of this. This is the updraft velocity swath, indicates where we have stronger updrafts, which can mean a tornado. It could also mean large hail and also indicate sometimes damaging winds, but you get this going, you can see what I mean with West Virginia and that northern part of the state, but it really gets pretty loud as we get into Maryland, even a very small section of northern VA. And when we have these more vibrant, bright colors, this is where we could have certainly a tornado, some large hail. So please be aware of the tornado threat across these areas tomorrow. We're going to go over this information another time in tomorrow morning's video. And see if it's upticked or uptrended or whatever, but there is certainly a tornado risk in this area for tomorrow and large hail. So now let's skip ahead a couple days. This is for day 5. That was day 2. That's for tomorrow. So day 3 is Tuesday. Day 4 is Wednesday. Day 5 is Thursday. So let's make sure we got that right because I can be everywhere. Yeah. So this is day 5. So this is Thursday. We do have a severe weather risk here in the Midwest. It's kind of small, but it does include Des Moines, Omaha, back over to Lincoln, down to St. Joseph, Kirksville, Maryland. Includes a good chunk of Iowa. We have already a 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles of any given location. This could mean anything, right? Could be a risk of tornadoes, damaging winds, hail, or all of the above. So this is kind of day 1 of what I think is going to be the beginning of a somewhat active period. Now, I do think it'll kind of build up to a more active period as we get maybe deeper in the next weekend, early the following week. But as of now, a 15% risk of severe weather. Now, we go to day 6. This is for Friday. We have a very long 15% risk of severe weather that stretches, folks, all the way to almost San Angelo, Texas, Abilene, Texas, through Oklahoma City, through the Fort Worth area, Wichita Falls, Fort Smith, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Joplin, Springfield, St. Louis, goes right to the heart of Illinois, Bloomington, Effingham, Mount Vernon, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, through Chicago, South Bend, Kalamazoo, Toledo, all the way up into Detroit. Large area that has a risk of severe weather. All we know is if you live in that yellow area, there is a 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles in any given location. There's nothing after that, but I do want to note, and I'm going to click on this. I do want to note, you can stop the screen if you want. It might be too small to read, but it does speak on that there could be some more outlooks issued here in the next couple of days. So I would not be surprised if, say, we get into tomorrow, the next day, we have some outlooks issued for the Southern Plains as we're getting into this weekend. I'm going to speak on why here in a second. So if we're talking about the general pattern, now I'm going to try to explain this the best way I can. And I feel like on average throughout the years, I've gotten better and better with explaining it. So this is kind of the portion of the video where, we're building up to the event. So we're kind of explaining the setup until we can really just tunnel vision on it, kind of like what we did for tomorrow's severe weather threat at the beginning of this video. So remember, the blue on your screen is lower pressure. Kind of the pinkish salmon looking color, whatever you want to call this right here. That is ridging. Okay, so that's higher pressure. Lower pressure is normally unsettled weather. A higher pressure is normally calm weather. Now, kind of the boundary between both, like you see right in here. So you got the kind of the middle part between the blue and let's just call it orange. You have basically where your weather happens. So you have a flow around both of these features. Okay, so let's just really speak on the flow around the blue area, the lower pressure. So the flow around this lower pressure, and this is for OOZ Wednesday. So this is Tuesday evening, Tuesday night of this coming week. Well, of this week now, you can say. So the flow is going just like this around this area. So if the flow is going north to south, and then obviously goes west to east, and then it begins to go back southwest to northeast. But if the flow's coming like this means that this is pulling in cold air from the north down this way. That's why we're going to have a brief cool down across the eastern U.S. this week, after a little bit of a warm up maybe tomorrow. This is also, because the flow's coming from the north, pushing all of our warm, moist air and kind of suppressing it into the Gulf of Mexico, or just lower latitudes, more southern latitudes. So it's kind of pushing all that and kind of keeping it down here for now. So what does that do? Well, that kind of chops off severe weather chances for a period of time. So that's why, after tomorrow, the severe weather threat kind of begins to drop for a couple days, because this trough has to work through, and this really stabilizes the air mass. Now, I know that it doesn't make sense, because lower pressure means unsettled weather, and you immediately think, well, how is that stable air? Well, it brings, what I mean is the lower pressure itself kind of bring unsettled weather, but behind it, it brings that more stable air, cooler, drier air behind it. This wraps around this area of lower pressure. So let's not get too hung up on it for too long, because y'all know how I am. I'll get hung up on something for way too long. That's one of the things that I probably struggle with the most here. But now I want you to watch the evolution of the pattern after this. And this is the Euro ensemble, by the way. Kind of keep your eyes on this feature and this feature up here. Lower pressure showing up in Western Canada and then off the coast of California. But this big blue blob begins to move off the eastern seaboard. And then a ridge immediately builds back in. Ridge brings typically calmer conditions and warmer conditions. You can get impulses of energy inside the ridge, of course, pop up thunderstorms, but in general, it's going to bring calmer conditions, high pressure, and it's going to bring warmer conditions. And this quickly builds over the eastern U.S. And this is kind of, we flip-flop from about 48 hours ago. It was showing another trough digging down across the eastern U.S., but that's not the case anymore. So now we got this ridge, and let's back it up a little bit. So we got this ridge building over the central to eastern U.S., and this is OOZ Friday. Okay, so this is Thursday evening. Remember, we have that severe weather threat across the Midwest for a pretty small area across the plains for Thursday. This is because, remember, the flow around this little feature right here is going just like that. Okay, so this is throwing what we call enough kinematics, wind flow, across areas of the Midwest where we have that severe weather threat. And check it out, that area that has that severe weather threat, kind of in that middle zone between the orange and the blue. So that's where the flow is going, because flow around this feature right here is going just like that. This is also, as the flow is going around it, kind of yanking up some better moisture. Okay? And this ridge also helps to yank up this better moisture. So they kind of work in tandem, right? Ridge, the flows kind of around the ridge kind of going like this and then like that. So this is actually kind of working in tandem to bring some better moisture and just better moisture from the lower latitudes into the picture up through the plains. So what that does is it creates an area geographically of that favors conditions. It favors overlapping conditions for severe weather in that X mark that I drew. So we move forward here, because we probably talked about that time frame a little bit too long, and then we start to get into our Friday, which, remember, we have that long area that has a risk of severe weather stretching. Let's try to draw it out here, stretching from here all the way through here, and it might not be perfect, but you get what I'm saying. So you might look at this and you say, well, this is more into the orange area, but don't focus too much on high pressure and low pressure when it comes to the surface. This is still at 500 millibars, 18,000 feet up in the atmosphere, but this in general shows us what kind of pattern we're working with, especially when it comes to steering currents. But we speak more on that when it comes to hurricane season. But the same thing, a little bit more of a split flow. So some of this flow is kind of going like this and shooting across this area, a little bit of flow kind of shooting off like that. So we actually might have a little bit more of a bimodal kind of mode out here where we have two separate areas of severe weather for Friday, but we still need to figure that out. But we got this big area, kind of this upper low or trough across the southwest. This is definitely a precursor look to something larger if this trough eventually ejects or amplifies. So once again, this is bringing in all those that flow right through this area, and then we're getting that warm moist air getting wrapped around this ridge, getting pulled out of the Gulf. So this is creating overlapping conditions for severe weather. And moving forward here, it gets a little bit more of a question because model guys doesn't 100% agree, but eventually this area in blue kind of ejects, so we get this trough ejection across the plains. This could bring a bigger severe weather threat, could cause a stronger surface low to develop, and then we just have that look where we have a ridge in the east, troughing in the west, so we're going to continue to have severe weather episodes in response. So that's the more difficult way to look at it, and we'll kind of move through this portion a little bit fast, but we're talking about kinematics, and remember we're speaking about the wind flow, and this is a great example of it. So we start off, remember I just showed you, starting off with the blues and the oranges on the 500 millibar chart. We're starting off in the same kind of time frame as we just did for the last frame here. And if you notice, you see how the flow is going just like this, just like we just described across the eastern U.S. Remember, this is knocking down any kind of warm, moist air from the south. It's pushing it down, suppressing it because the flow is going like this. And this is from the middle of this week. Now, we move here in time. This flow exits the eastern seaboard, and then we start to get more of a flow that goes like this, okay, out the southwest. This brings that wind energy, that flow in the atmosphere to get those storms going in place as kind of the flow shifts and it begins to shoot out of the southwest across the middle of the country to the northeast. Now, we kind of begin to progress this forward into our Friday. It continues. You got that flow shooting across the country, a broad, large area of flow going across the middle of the country. And it's right across that huge, long, strung out 15% risk area for Friday. And this is for Friday. 18Z Fridays like midday, early afternoon, this coming Friday. So it makes sense why they have a pretty large 15% risk area. Now, where's the best moisture going to be in this setup? I'll show you that here in a second, but in general, you see that, and there's a pretty large corridor that has plenty of flow in the atmosphere to at least pose a damaging wind threat. And the one thing I would focus in on at this range is that there's enough flow in the atmosphere to get these storms going, kind of a forcing mechanism. But, this is the Euro ensemble. We have 50 to 60 knot on average of upper level flow going across the middle of the country. And after we get past Friday, things get a little bit more complex. We got a lot of flow up here. Is there going to be cooler, dry air? We got more building up into Saturday across the southern plains. We get into Sunday. We get this impulsive energy right here. Is this going to be enough to get storms going? It just gets a little bit more complex, but the potential is definitely there for more severe weather days after this coming Friday. Now, moisture, same thing. We started off for this coming Tuesday evening. Notice how we got dew points, which is your drier air. Dew points in like the 30s, the 40s. That's too dry for any severe weather. And you dew points in the 60s. 50s will work sometimes, but really 60s and higher is really what will get the job done. But you can see most of the country is pretty, stabilized, very dry, cool air. And it continues as we get into Wednesday. But as we start to build into Wednesday evening, we start to get into Thursday, which is that severe weather day across the Midwest. We get a spike of moisture that gets all the way with dew points into the 60s across the Midwest, which will get the job done in this part of the country. And once you get into like Thursday evening, you get this corridor of dew points in the 60s that get all the way up into areas of Iowa. And then it's pretty much full steam ahead, guys. I mean, you get into Friday, we have this very large area of moist air that extends all the way up into the Midwest. And remember, we have all that flow going across this area that I just showed you. So what do you get? You get the overlapping conditions of severe weather, kinematic-wise and thermodynamic-wise, across a very large sector of the country. And then we start to get into Saturday. where will our best flow be Saturday? Will it be down here across the southern plains? Will it be over here? There's no 15% risk of severe weather up for this day yet, but one thing I would really focus in on after Friday is that you get a pretty large, broad sector of moist air that just hangs out with us across a large country of this large section of the country. So, and this continues through the length of this run. We continue just to have a lot of moist air just hanging out in general around the same area. So this is why I think the severe weather is about to be full send ahead, unfortunately. In response to all that, moist air, of course, your Cape levels will respond. So we get into Thursday, there's that slither of storm energy, storm fuel that gets all the way across the plains. And then we get into Friday, there's that kind of large area that has Cape values well over 1,000 joules per kilogram in spots across this entire 15% risk area. And then how's it going to be once we get after that? This is getting into, Saturdays. This is getting into Sunday. Storm fuel hanging out towards the southern states, and this is just having a hard time moving forward here. We get into next Monday. Look at all that storm fuel across the western deep south, and it just looks like a lot of Cape begins to build on average across the middle of the country, southern tier of the country, and it just looks like severe weather is about to be ongoing. Now, if you look at what's going on at the surface, no point in staying on this too long, but you can see what happens here Thursday. You can see the thunderstorms popping off here. Thursday already. This is just Thursday morning in response to this little surface low right here. It's actually not little. It's a little 995 low, so it's actually decently strong, but you can see the storms kind of going across the Midwest. And then we get into Friday, and you're going to see huge area that has a risk of thunderstorms kind of going on right here. I know it's probably kind of hard to see on your screen, but you see just splotches of green, yellow, and orange. This tells us that there's just a risk of thunderstorms. This is not like mesoscale models or anything like that. This is just global model guidance. And then we're probably going to have some thunderstorms. It shows some storms across like Oklahoma, like Saturday. But we got to figure Saturday out. We could have some storms across the mid-Atlantic Saturday too, but Sunday shows a bigger system ejecting. We got a lot of storms showing up across the middle of the country. This could be a bigger severe weather threat, and then this fully ejects based off the Euro, and then we could have a severe weather threat Monday across areas of the country. And then, I really think as we're getting to this weekend, things could get pretty serious fast. You got a surface low ejecting across the middle of the country. So, all right, getting into today's weather, we do have snow continuing to fall across areas of New England. We got energy shooting across the northern states. We got areas of showers with a smaller system going across portions of the Great Lakes region, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley. This is the system right here that will bring that severe weather opportunity for areas of the Ohio Valley. So there it is right there. It's diving down out of Canada to the southeast. But watches, warnings, and advisories. We do have frost advisories that aren't showing up here on your map, but you got freeze warnings in the purple. We got a lot of red flag warnings. We got a lot of wind alerts out here because of this system diving down, creating a lot of high winds. It's dry too, so there's a fire danger if you live in these red counties, so be aware of that. The Storm Prediction Center outlook, no real risk of severe weather today. It doesn't mean that you can't have a strong storm or two, but just a general risk of thunderstorms across the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region, and a little bit of thunderstorm activity is possible across the high plains and the central Rockies. No threat of flash flooding today. Southeast, a beautiful day. It'll be cooler in certain areas, but it's starting to warm out to the west, warm up out west. I gotta sneeze. Okay, it went away. But in general, beautiful day, nothing expected. Up here in the Northeast, a little bit more, not so beautiful. But for a lot of the areas, it'll be fine. But we continue just to get this pesky low pressure. It'll continue to throw back moisture, especially in the Maine. This will mix with some heavy wet snow. Talking about snow, we had definitely some of those short-range model guidance. Some of that short-range model guidance was certainly correct about southern New England, the snow. Areas of central Mass picked up I think I saw a 9-inch snowfall reading. So you guys got clobbered by some heavy wet snow yesterday across the area. But we started getting the This evening, things will start to dry out, and then another system moves in, brings some light rain overnight across the Ohio Valley, eventually into the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. So we'll wake up to some showers across the Mid-Atlantic and maybe all the way up into New York. And then the South Central U.S., there is absolutely nothing going on. Maybe some breezy conditions, but just nothing to really speak on. Now, the North Central U.S., we're going to have just multiple little areas of showers. For example, this is around 2 p.m. this afternoon. We got some showers making its way through central, south central Wisconsin. We got some heavier rain up here near northeast Minnesota. This shower activity will make it across Lake Michigan into lower Michigan this evening. Some heavy rain, maybe a rumble of thunder, some showers up here in the UP. And then some cold air gets involved, and by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning, we probably are waking up to some moderate to heavy snow in northern areas of Minnesota. So, out west, we actually have a couple blizzard warnings in Montana, but this will begin to lighten up. We'll get very windy conditions across the high plains, so be aware of that with the fire danger. But out west, as far as precipitation, it looks pretty quiet. Temperatures still chilly across the northeast, but we are beginning to recover. I mean, it's going to get into the 60s today, maybe a 70-degree reading in lower Michigan. 60s are possible up here in the UP of Michigan. 80s in the Midwest, 60s and 70s across the southeast. You got that wraparound return flow. But it's going to get in the low 100s in certain areas of Oklahoma and Texas today. Pretty hot. But the northern high plains, just 40s and 30s, so a cooler day, but it'll warm up quick. So over the next couple of days. That's all I got, guys. Video went a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but we'll get back to the devotions tomorrow. I know I've taken a 3-day kind of stoppage of doing it, but we'll get back in routine of doing it this week and try to get to it just about an everyday thing. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.